The parents that I work with in New York, that I see around the country, are very concerned that their rights are being taken away, that their knowledge about the science is being pushed away by an agenda that only says unvaccinated children are a problem. Just to wrap up, in New York, when we had the measles outbreak, in California, when they had a measles outbreak, there were 194 cases. Of the 194 cases, 73 cases were due to the actual virus in the vaccine itself. 73, 38%. 73 cases were due to the measles virus causing measles. All the literature states that measles virus infection is not true measles and should not be counted as a health threat. That means only 121 kids developed measles, 121 people. New York State did not do the proper testing that's given down by the CDC to test every child to see if the children had measles strain, wild type measles, or a mutated measles. There are cases around the country and around the world where in a 95 to 98% vaccinated population, they had measles outbreaks because they found mutated viruses. There, as I said before, there are cases where the virus mutates, where there are strain replacements. New York State did not do the proper testing of the 1,000+ young children and adults who came down with measles. They wrote a little blurb on the CDC website of the 2 wild viruses that were responsible for the measles outbreak. But we in New York know that the testing was not done. 4,200 kids on Long Island had the religious exemption and were not vaccinated. And there was not one case of measles on Long Island. Thank you.
Live in real time. There I go, finally. Sorry about that. So hopefully, Jennifer Sparks here. And I was just playing you a video of Dr. Larry Palevsky that was recorded in the state of Connecticut in 2019. And I'm hoping that that came out and you guys got to see that whole video. But I will definitely get that video all queued up again because I would love to replay that for you. So let me just replay that for you as I get my ducks in a row. It's like a 5-minute video of Dr. Larry Palevsky, and then we're going to get into all this, the measles. But I'm going to try and replay this Dr. Larry Palevsky and go in on the inside of the production side of this podcast and tweak out a little bit of issue that I might be having on certain platforms. So bear with me. This is Dr. Larry Palevsky.
The parents that I work with in New York, that I see around the country, are very concerned that their rights are being taken away, that their knowledge about the science is being pushed away by an agenda that only says unvaccinated children are a problem. Just to wrap up, in New York, when we had the measles outbreak, in California, when they had a measles outbreak, there were 194 cases. Of the 194 cases, 73 cases were due to the actual virus in the vaccine itself. 73, 38%. 73 cases were due to the measles virus causing measles. All the literature states that measles virus infection is not true measles and should not be counted as a health threat. That means only 121 kids developed measles, 121 people. New York State did not do the proper testing that's given down by the CDC to test every child to see if the children had measles strain, wild type measles, or a mutated measles. There are cases around the country and around the world where in a 95 to 98% vaccinated population, they had measles outbreaks because they found mutated viruses. There, as I said before, there are cases where the virus mutates, where there are strain replacements. New York State did not do the proper testing of the 1,000+ young children and adults who came down with measles. They wrote a little blurb on the CDC website of the 2 wild viruses that were responsible for the measles outbreak. But we in New York know that the testing was not done. 4,200 kids on Long Island had the religious exemption and were not vaccinated. And there was not one case of measles on Long Island. Thank you.
Testing. There I got it. Do I got the audio? 1, 2, 1, 2. Hopefully, I think I got the audio. I should have the audio. I think you can hear me. You may not have heard me a few minutes ago. This is working out some tech things happening. That was Dr. Larry Palevsky, and that was at a testimony. That was his testimony in Connecticut for a vaccine information hearing that happened in circa 2019, 2020. It was, 5-6 years ago. And that was his testimony for a vaccine information hearing, a vaccine safety information hearing. And at that time, they were having the measles outbreak in the state of New York. And there was a lot of, now post-COVID, a lot of similar COVID language in the messaging too around that, and blaming people. Well, at the time of COVID, of course, there was no vaccine, but like as we get further along into COVID and they have this magic vaccine, anyone who isn't vaccinated, of course, is accused for spreading disease and all this stuff. So it's like the same playbook. It's just an interesting thing that I've noticed there. But let's take a little walk through the history of the MMR vaccine, because that's what I'm really curious about. And my time, like my journey in the medical freedom movement and as a mother and as a journalist, researching about the MMR vaccine has proven to be really fascinating, honestly. So Andy Wakefield, I'm going to start with this little video, and I was trying to put the links into the Twitter, and unfortunately it wouldn't allow me to put all the show links. So this video will be going into the Substack. I know I say that all my videos are going in Substack, and they don't always do that because I've had an article or something else, and the video is like an additive. So, but this particular one will be in the Substack. So follow me on Substack at the Sparks Report, and I will have those references there for you. So Andy Wakefield recently produced a movie. I know people, oh my gosh, she said Andy Wakefield. Of course, people in the medical freedom are very familiar with Andy Wakefield and his work and are looking at it with a clear eye instead of through the lens of what the media portrayed this man to be. Anyway, aside all that stuff, so Andy Wakefield made a film called Protocol 7. And what's really interesting about that, it's about this case that a lot of people don't know about with the MMR. So let's take a listen to this short interview. It's like a 2-minute clip, and this is from Refuge of Sinners Twitter account. So I want to give credit to wherever I get information from. So this is from Refuge of Sinners, and let me get this pulled up for you guys. I'm going to play this little clip. So this Protocol 7 is available now. I don't have all the information on that, but it's out there, and we're going to get a little bit into the meat of what the movie's all about. Let's take a listen to Andy Wakefield for a second, and we'll take it from there.
Why did they ever combine these antigens into a combined vaccine, measles, mumps, rubella together?
What the real reason was is that in 1961, at the National Institutes of Health, measles was targeted for global eradication using the vaccine. There was a big market. There was a huge market for measles vaccine. At the time, it was open season. There were many producers, several producers of the measles vaccine. There was no exclusive license. And Maurice Hilleman came along from Merck, and he isolated the mumps virus from his daughter, Gerald Lynn, and developed the mumps vaccine. And he went to the CDC and he said, I want you to put this vaccine on the childhood schedule. And they said, no, we've done a study on mumps. It's a trivial disease in children and it doesn't cost anything. So no, we're not going to do that. So he went state by state, starting in Massachusetts, encouraging them somehow, the state health authorities, to put it on the schedule for that state. And eventually, so many states had introduced mandatory mumps vaccination that the CDC said, and this is a true quote from a head of one of the ex-heads of the CDC, the late Donald Henderson, oh, to hell with it. We might as well give it since everybody's using it. So that was the science upon which mandatory mumps vaccination was based, and oh, to hell with it called by the CDC. So then you had mumps vaccination. What Maurice Hilleman did next is combine measles, mumps, and rubella into one shot. Now, Merck had a monopoly on mumps. Mm-hmm. So if they could get MMR to be the preferred vaccine, the vaccine of choice, then they could clean up the market for measles. They could take it over. So it was, if that was the thinking behind it, which I suspect it was, in business terms, it was very shrewd. In health terms, I think it was potentially catastrophic. But it was really an effort to corner the measles market globally that mumps vaccine became such a useful device. And yeah, I think that was the real reason behind it.
That is... This story is so crazy. So when I stumbled, okay, so that's Andy Wakefield. He just did a new documentary on this. I'm looking forward to seeing it. I haven't seen it yet. So I'm really looking forward to seeing it. Sorry, I'm adjusting my mic. If it was getting distorted there, I apologize for that because I'm having some audio issues here that I'm going to fix right now in real time on my machine. So Andy Wakefield has this new documentary out that you can Google it up, the Protocol 7, and find different places where you can watch it. I don't have all the information on where you can watch it. I'm pretty sure that it's out. I've kind of lost track of it being just busy with a Connecticut General, assembly going on. But the measles thing really has gotten my full-on attention now with the MMR. Because of all of the issues with this particular vaccine, it is really concerning, and I just wanted to put this podcast together and talk about what Andy Wakefield's movie is about, the Protocol 7, which is absolutely fascinating in a very dark, macabre way. That's going to really upset you. It's going to piss you off, probably as much as it does for me. So let me take you back through some history here and share with you some things. So about 10 years ago, I think it was 2007, 2009, two scientists from Merck who were working on the mumps portion of the vaccine blew the whistle on Merck, and it set off this decade-long lawsuit against Merck, the manufacturers of the MMR vaccine, which is there are two vaccines licensed in the United States. I don't recall off the top of my head the other pharmaceutical company, but the main one that's used, the one that is primarily given to everyone, is the Merck. I mean, they're all like monopolies. They maybe have one competitor, if you could call that real competition. Anyway, this is the nature of vaccinology and the vaccine business. So Merck has their MMR vaccine. You just heard that little bit of an interview with Andy Wakefield talking about, and I asked this question out today on Facebook. Why did, what is the scientific reason they combined these shots together, these antigens together, the measles, the mumps, the rubella? Why is this done? Is it done because this is what's best for your health, for your child, for immunity? You would think, right? Because if this is what public health calls itself, because apparently these jabs are, you're not going to just go and get the jab and administer it yourself, right? So these jabs are produced and they're put out through our government agencies and our physicians and doctors and all this kind of stuff. This is the market of the vaccinologist or vaccinology, right? So with Merck, they combined, so they had a heavy monopoly with the vaccine, and they had the mumps vaccine. They were the only ones that had the mumps vaccine. And so what happened is this two scientists blew the whistle saying that Merck cooked the science. Take a listen to this. I'll just read you just a tad bit because I have a lot I want to jump around here. And this is right. I do have a bunch of links I was trying to put out in Twitter. I apologize for that. If you're really itching to get them before I might get this into the Substack, just leave a comment and I'll see if I can re-comment into there. And I have a huge list of links that I want to share with you. I'm so frustrated that everything was going kaput. I was able to successfully do that last week, but not happening this week. Anyway, so Stephen A. Crowling, let me blow this up so you guys can maybe, of course I'm blind too. So let me blow this up. Okay. So Stephen A. Crowling and Joan A. Wolkowski, former Merck virologists, blew the whistle by filing a, I'm not sure how you say this, QTAM action lawsuit, whatever that means, U.S. versus Merck & Co. in August of 2010. The scientists alleged that the efficacy tests of the measles, mumps, rubella vaccine were faked. They were cooked with rabbit blood, guys. This is what these two scientists blew the whistle on Merck in 2010, and they said that Merck cooked the science with rabbit blood to make the mumps vaccine look like it was more efficacious than it was by a bit. So this turned into over a decade-long lawsuit, which dragged on and ended up becoming like an antitrust, which I just don't understand why. And, it goes on. It was recently decided in 2023, and they lost on like a technicality. So Merck won the lawsuit, and the scientists that kind of started this whole thing lost it. So we lost in the end, okay? So here's one problem. So Merck is sued for the mumps portion of the MMR vaccine. Did you guys know that? How many people know that out there? Because I didn't realize that till just a couple of years ago. I think I got jabbed with the MMR in college. I'm pretty sure. I might have even gotten it twice because I transferred and something happened with my records and I was young at the time. And it's just very frustrating the way, we just like fall into these things and you like say, what was I doing? Anyway, so I'm like, you're kidding me. So taking a vaccine with part of it, all of the ingredients that goes into making it, okay? So there's all this stuff they call an adjuvant, and the adjuvant stimulates the immune system. And basically the adjuvant is like poisoning the immune system. And typically what they're using for an adjuvant is like aluminum, though there's all different things. And I don't think there's aluminum in the MMR. Don't quote me on that. But there are adjuvants, and it's different types of adjuvants that stimulate the immune system. There was mercury in the MMR, and I believe they changed the formula. There's a problem with that, or thymosol, or something like that. Years ago, that was supposedly a problem, or if it was taken out of there. I'm a little bit washy on that, so don't quote me on that either. But the problem is that the adjuvant stimulates the immune system, and it's a poison. It basically tells the immune system to react. It's not a natural way for an immune system to react to a virus, like the measles. So they cook the science to make the mumps look like it's looking better than it is. So you're getting a vaccine that is not working the way that they say it's going to work. So that's one thing. That's one thing. But let's take a look at some of the other interesting things about this this vaccine. So here it is where they're defeated, and they put it under an antitrust, which it's so unfortunate because there are problems with it. It is known that the mumps portion of the MMR is not as efficacious as they would like it to be to show efficacy for even getting the mumps portion of the vaccine. You can't get measles the measles vaccine unless you get all three. And my question is, who does that benefit? Why do they have it that way? Why is it that if you do want the vaccine, that you can't say, and this is one of the big pivotal parts of Andy Wakefield's work when all this was going down and this man was being smeared, Andy Wakefield simply wrote a paper that said, evidence suggests we might want to look into this further and offer single dose vaccines. And for that, the man was like hung to dry and persecuted and changed his whole life. Meanwhile, one of his colleagues that worked on a paper with him was able to get the English court to quash it out and say this was egregious, that it was totally wrong. These charges were ever brought up against the scientists in the first place. And that happened. And for Andy Wakefield, who came to the United States and never did, he didn't pursue it for over here. So there's a whole history of that. And that's not what I want to focus on with this. But it's interesting. So Andy Wakefield writes a paper and says, gee, there's some evidence. There could be a problem. Maybe it is giving the 3 shots together. I can't wait to see his film Protocol 7 because I'm absolutely fascinated by this. So because of that, he was just like, oh my gosh, totally, oh my God, the anti-vaccine and creating vaccine hesitancy. But meantime, Merck knows that it's done something funky. 2 scientists in 2010 later blow the whistle on Merck and say that the science is cooked for the mumps portion of the MMR vaccine. So, you can't make this up. It's really kind of crazy. So let's look at a couple of other things here about just that with the measles jab. So let's go. There was a really good report. Let me pull this up. This is like a history timeline, and it's great because this article here they show their work, which I think when you're putting articles together, definitely show your work. That's why I feel really bad that I don't have the links for you. I can't get them into Twitter right now. And Facebook, I'll get those into you. That's easy. I'll just put those in the comments for you guys later for whomever wants them, and you can come back to the video and grab it. This is a great article. It's an older article that I had. It's actually Barbara Lowe Fisher who wrote this article that was republished in Vaccine Impact, which is a cool newsletter. If you can get this newsletter, it's great. I love it. They also sell glyphosate-free foods, which I also really appreciate too. So this is an older article. This is Barbara Lowe Fisher. I really respect her work from the National Vaccine Information Center. And so she goes into the whole history, and it's a long article with a lot of great information, and she gets into the nitty-gritty of it. And so the U.S. government and the World Health Organization, this is really interesting here. The pharmaceutical industry and the multinational communications corporation all agree that measles virus is extremely dangerous. The MMR vaccine is very safe and effective, and all children must get 2 doses of the vaccine. Which is really interesting because where did all these ideas come from? Like why they didn't know at first when they started giving off the vaccine, and there was still vaccine, what they would call breakthrough or vaccine failure. In fact, so the mumps comes out, the measles comes out in 1963. They're giving it out in a single dose, but they're quickly working on the MMR, releasing that officially in 1978. MMR gets its licensure. And in 1973, Stanley Plotkin authors a article, and I wish I could get into JAMA. I want to get a membership into JAMA. There's several articles that I want to read. It's expensive membership into JAMA. And so, Stanton, this is another article that Barbara Lowe Fisher also wrote. And you can sign up for Vaccine Impact News, but this is also what he's doing is he's sharing a few articles about the history of the measles vaccine. And where was that Stanley Plotkin? Oh, I'm sorry. I picked up the wrong link. I wanted to bring up that paper. I apologize. Live in real time, and my notes are a little sloppy. You can see my notes. These are all the links, guys, that I'm going after that I wanted to post for you. And unfortunately, I wasn't able to get them in there. What the heck did I do with Mr. Dr. Plotkin? So, okay. Unfortunately, I don't think I put the link there. Is this? Yeah, here it is. This is Dr. Plotkin. So Dr. Plotkin starts to talk about vaccine failure in 1973, which I find like really interesting. And I can't get the whole article. There was a little failures of protection by the measles vaccine. And so what started to happen when they introduced this vaccine and they started to make it go public? First of all, the reason why they introduced this vaccine or brought it out wasn't because they were afraid of the measles in the United States at all, or in Europe. In fact, it was a common childhood illness. This is the power of media marketing and the power of propaganda, that we are here today with this measles hysteria, and it's vaccines, 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 vaccines. It's like, this is tobacco science to the highest degree, okay? The highest degree. So everybody knew that the measles virus was a common childhood illness. Yes, there are children, a very small portion of humanity that could succumb to anything. And there's so many different diseases out there that there are not vaccines for that could kill children. Okay. And not to mention the fact that we take risks in life every day. There's no guarantee. So when they present, oh, you could die from the measles, and therefore you need to have this miraculous vaccine because it'll save your life. And not only do you really need it, but the government, your child's going to be mandated to take this vaccine to go to school and daycare. Meanwhile, the history tells us, and I'm going to bring up something else too. Let me just bring this up because this is great. This was really, and I recommend diving into the history of this and looking at 1962, 1963, and those periods of time. There's a couple of papers in JAMA that I really want to read. They're expensive, so I was trying to break into them. I have ways to break in and get over the paywalls on some things, but I can't do it with JAMA. So it's just a little aggravated that I can't read this article. But we can look at the abstract together, and you'll see why I really want to take a look at that. Hold on there's a couple of JAMA articles, so I just want to make sure I have the correct one here for you. Okay, so this article is the medical importance of measles. I want to read this so bad. The medical importance of measles. During the past 40 years, the ecological approach to disease has become a basic concept of epidemiology. Among all diseases, measles has stood the classic example of successful parasiticism. This self-limiting infection of short duration, moderate severity, and low vitality has maintained a remarkably stable biological balance over the centuries. So measles is not something that just poof. It's been around for a really long time. And it was so common. I was talking to my mom today. My mom had the measles. She got the measles twice because she got it as a baby, which is really interesting because they say that babies who get the vaccine too early, it doesn't take the vaccine. And she had the measles twice because the natural virus, she developed the immunity to it as an infant when she got it, and she got it twice. But that's my mom. That was not very common at all. But they all had it. My husband had it. This is no big deal. Nobody cared. It was exactly like the Brady Bunch episode, okay? That's what it was. Mothers and fathers, nobody was calling up the doctor like, oh my God, we have the measles, we're gonna die. That wasn't the case. People knew what to do. They knew how to deal with the virus, how to keep children hydrated and healthy, and what to do if somebody ended up developing a severe case of it, because we are all different and some things can be really hard for people. And so what really would be great in our modern society is if we could have functional medicine, and if a child has a bad case of measles, that they will be able to get some allopathic medical help or some functional medicine with allopathic help if they needed extra help with the measles. But most children are going to recover quite well, quite easily. And we're looking at a paper. This is in JAMA. And I'm just looking at the abstract. I really want to read it, but JAMA is expensive. This was written in 1962, by the way. This is before all the crazy hysteria that we're dealing with now, where we're oh my God, it's this deadly disease. You're going to die, and you better take a vaccine. And making it seem like it's something that it's absolutely not. People don't need to be afraid of common childhood illnesses. And so when we take a look through history and we read where their thinking was, it's really, really interesting. I want to read this paper so bad. So let's go on from here. So it's a self-limiting infection of short duration, moderate severity, and low fatality, and has maintained a remarkably stable biological balance over the centuries. Sorry. So here we are. You know, as 1978 comes around, there's actually right around this time in the 60s, there's another scientist, and he wants to eradicate measles, and he's setting out to do it. He is the scientist behind the smallpox vaccine. His name is slipping my brain right now, but just know him by the scientist behind the smallpox vaccine, wanted to eradicate the measles vaccine. And so it really became a big part of that, was on the scientific side. But on the pharmaceutical side, I think it looks more like, ooh, you know, could we make money from the measles? But in the beginning, they were having a lot of trouble with the vaccines because so they wanted to vaccinate these babies, like 1-year-old babies. And one of the things with 1-year-old babies is if they were breastfed babies, they get a period of measles immunity from their mother's breast milk. That's how fascinating our immune systems are. I would like to do more looking at that, and I would hope that Bobby Kennedy, I was a bit upset with his Fox opinion piece there. I didn't care for that, Bobby. I'm sorry, I'm going to have to say that, and I think we should hold Bobby's feet to the fire. People get really upset and emotional. Beware of that. You know, I'm just not... I really have a lot of respect for RFK Jr. and his work, and I think he's great, and I think it's great that he's there. I want him to be more radically honest, because when he says things like community immunity and things like that, I'm turned off by that. Of all the things in what he said, and I think it's great he talks about vitamin A, I mean, that's great. That's great. It's up on the CDC website. You could treat measles with vitamin A. That's gold. That's great. I love that because it's true, and it's wonderful. I'm into that. But what my concern is that he, in his opinion piece, talked about how, you know, community immunity and people who can't get vaccinated, and that's like wishy-washy talk to me because there's so many problems with this MMR. I feel like the MMR, and we're going to look at, we might not get to it with this show because I don't want it to go on too long, but, you know, there's quite a bit of problems with the MMR vaccine. In fact, Del Bigtree started his career in this alternative media world with his film Vaxxed, where he came out with the William Thompson story, and everybody in medical freedom knows about William Thompson. But those who are new to this whole idea of medical freedom and informed consent might be like, who's William Thompson? Well, William Thompson is a CDC whistleblower, and he blew the whistle to a scientist named Brian Hooker. And what William Thompson and Brian Hooker, so Brian Hooker recorded conversations that he had. So William Thompson wasn't like blowing the whistle maybe on purpose as much as he would like to. They were recorded phone calls that Brian Hooker recorded to make sure that they were recorded because William Thompson spilled the beans that the CDC was burning up files that was showing that black babies were being harmed by the MMR. If they were given the vaccine at a certain age, they were more likely to develop a serious autism. Okay, and so this whole film Vax came out and goes around the story of the CDC whistleblower William Thompson, and you could hear that. You could type that into maybe a search engine and find it. You could probably find it going and looking over on the highway and looking up the movie Vax by Del Bigtree. Polly Tommy was like producer of it. They all put the Vax bus together from there, expecting to drive around the country, talking to people who were injured by MMR, never realizing that it was going to be like the whole kit and caboodle, that these products have a lot of problems and it isn't just the MMR. So there's a lot of fascinating history here. So with all of that, you know, I was a little bit upset with that statement by Bobby Kennedy, because I want radical honesty here. I want to, like, I opened up with that video of Dr. Larry Palevsky talking about, you know, testing for the wild strain versus, you know, the vaccine strain. And the measles is a live attenuated vaccine. That means that it's made with live virus, and it can shed and it can cause the measles. And what's happened is that when they first came out with the measles vaccine, and it was a single dose vaccine, they didn't have a lot of, it wasn't successful. It wasn't what, first of all, people weren't interested in even taking it. They had to get people to even want to take it. So they had to develop like a way to sell it to people. And one of the ways to sell it to people too, besides the fact what Andy Wakefield is talking about, you know, they had this mumps portion and whatnot. They wanted to put them all together and market it that way, and so you get it all done, and they could sell all these vaccines in one. And look at how convenient it is. So it became a marketing scheme and also a money-making scheme. It's quite fascinating. So let's take a look at this article, pre-MMR. And this is just the abstract, and this is in JAMA, where they're talking about how this is, you know, a stable biological balance of over the centuries. So these epidemiologists, and there are many who tend to revere the biological balance, have long argued that the ecological equilibrium of measles is solidly based, that it cannot readily be disrupted, and that therefore we must learn to live with this parasite. So my friends that argue about the viruses, they'll appreciate this. And, you know, whatever we call it, virus, parasite, bacteria, there's something, right? So this is absolutely fascinating. This is 1962. This is a paper that is in the JAMA Pediatrics. Really wish I had a membership to this. It's super, super expensive. By Dr. Alexander D. Lagmer, MD, 1962. I'm just looking at the abstract, though I wish I could read the whole paper. I could if I wanted to pay for it. This speaker, not so long ago, was counted among this group and waxed eloquent on the subject in print. Happily, now he talks about happily this era is ending. Now new and potent tools that promise effective control measures for measles are at hand. If these tools are properly developed and widely used, it should be possible. So it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy to get where we are today. Isn't that wild? Doesn't it? It really bothers me. It bothers me a lot because there's so many problems with the MMR. There's so many problems with the MMR. I mean, more problems than we could shake a stick at. I've got something else I want to share with you too. Let me jump over one more article from JAMA that I want to share with you as well. Hold on. Okay, here it is, Samuel Katz. This is a Samuel Katz one. And with Samuel Katz, I was really curious. Well, let's go over here. So how do they get these parasites, viruses, whatever it is? How do they get this antigen into a vaccine? Like, how do they do that? Well, they use aborted fetal tissue. And the measles vaccine has both. The measles vaccine, the MMR, has both MRC5 and W-8. Is it 38? W-38, I have that in my notes, but they used the 2 older strains of the aborted fetal lines. It's really fascinating. He's not going to get into this here, but let's take a look. Let's take a quick look at this. Hold on a second. So this is also 1962, and this is just getting into the use of the Edmundston attenuated measles strain. So this was taken out of like a live case of measles, and then let's read the abstract. Again, another paper I'd love to read in JAMA. 3 years have elapsed since the first trial in susceptible children of an attenuated measles virus propagated in tissue cultures of chick embryo cells and the MRC5, because that's the only way they were really doing it. During this period of time, it has been possible to enlarge our experience with the administration of a vaccine to both normal children and those suffering from various disorders. To accumulate further data documenting the clinical and serological responses induced by this material, and to observe the prophylactic efficacy of vaccination in varying environmental situations. The initial study undertaken in 1958 included 13 residents of a state institution for the mentally deficient. More than 10,000 children have now received similar vaccine in one fashion or another. Sorry, I lost myself. More than 10. Okay, here we go. In addition to healthy children and a few adults, those vaccinated include individuals with tuberculosis, asthma, cystic fibrosis, rheumatoid arthritis, cerebral palsy, epilepsy, malnutrition, nephrosis, cardiac disease, anocrotal hyplasia, and it's neurophagic diabetes, and sickle cell traits, leukemia, etc. The age of the vaccine, and I can't read the full text, but I just think it's really interesting how they were experimenting with this. And then another paper, abstract, because I can't get into there, he talks about the fact that it's not a scary disease that you have to be so worried about. Okay, here's this one. Attempts to discover safe and effective means. This is 1962, so there's a lot of discussion about this in the late 50s, early 60s, not because they needed to, but because they could. They made the vaccine not out of need, but because they had the technology, they had the science, they figured they could do it. And they used like the third world. Hey, we could give it over to the third world. They don't do well with measles. Well, the third world doesn't do well with any disease. You know, if you're living in poverty and in squalor-like conditions, you're susceptible to everything, not just a vaccine, a disease with a vaccine. So there was an opportunity to make money here. And in the beginning, the science was just like, let's just do it because we can. And the industry took off with that. So now here we are. So let's take a look at this ad. Another paper I want to read so bad. This is, of course, in the JAMA network, JAMA Pediatrics. Your doctor could go read this because he should be a member or she should be a member. You could, ask him about these articles that are in JAMA from 1962. This is John F. Enders, PhD, Samuel L. Katz, and Anne Holloway. And they're discussing the development of attenuated measles virus vaccines, a summary of recent investigations. There are so many papers like this going back through the history. It's absolutely fascinating to take a look at. And then you step back from all this and you say, how are we here now? Where there is such a screaming hysteria, where people are like angry. And what concerns me is I don't like this language where people will say, oh, it's the unvaccinated spreading this disease and blah, 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 blah. Do you know that every adult who's my age, I'm Generation X, I had that stupid measles vaccine. I would have rather caught the measles the way I caught the chickenpox, because then I would have lifetime immunity. So there's another paper that came out, and I'm going to show you that with in an article written by J.P. Hanley, who is great. You can follow him on Substack. He does great work when he has time to write. He was very much involved in Spellers, is a severely autistic son. And he was involved in Spellers, and he's involved with his son, because when you become injured with severe autism, it's really devastating, and you need a lifetime care. You need lifetime care. So here we go. Let's take a look at this. This is the abstract development of attenuated measles virus vaccine, a summary of recent investigation. Okay, sorry about that. Attempts to discover. Now, this is so interesting. Attempts to discover safe and effective means of inducing active immunity against measles have extended what the heck? Episodically. Episodically. Episodically, I'm sorry, my brain's shot today. Has extended episodically over a period exceeding 200 years, right? So we're dealing with something that's hundreds and hundreds of years around. Francis Home of Edinburgh initiated these studies when in 1758 he sacrificed the skin of susceptible children and applied cotton pledgelets soaked in blood of patients actually ill with measles. And this way he hoped to induce an immunizing infection unaccompanied by severe respiratory complications that in this time were a major concern. So a couple hundred years ago, measles was more of a concern. And then people over time, we develop an immunity. Some call it herd immunity, but the virus mutates, society gets immune to it, it doesn't circulate as much anymore. This is nature's design, not man's, okay? That's why in the 50s and the 60s, when measles was coming around, nobody cared about it. It wasn't a serious thing for most people. In fact, what the numbers really are, and it upset me again with Kennedy's op-ed, I think his statistic was like 1 in 1,000 could have potentially severe reactions to it. It's really like 1 in 10,000 if we look at all the numbers. And then the other thing is, it's like most cases of measles weren't even reported to any health agency at all, because kids got the measles and mom wasn't running to the doctor. They all knew how to take care of the measles at home for a majority of the cases. In fact, the majority of the cases would be like probably 95% of the people who contract measles are going to be just fine, or 98%. And a small percentage, not a large percentage of people, would get so severe complications. And yeah, severe complications are scary for anyone. But individuals who have an immunocompromised system or have a severe complication from an illness, this is why we're supposed to have a medical system, right? Wouldn't this be the ideal in a modern world, that if you do have a problem, we have treatments that you can use? If measles develops into pneumonia, you can take antibiotics. You can, there's all kinds of different means that you can take and get this child healthy, besides injections that come with a whole host of other problems. So here we go. So because the earlier work on active immunization has often been reviewed, I shall restrict this summary to the consideration of investigations on live attenuated virus vaccines, which have been reported since 1954 in the application of modern methods of tissue culture. What do you think those modern methods of tissue culture are? As a quiz for the day, what do you think those modern methods of tissue culture are? You know what those modern methods of tissue culture are? Those modern methods of tissue culture are aborted using the aborted fetal cell technology. So here we go. All right, over to the next article here. Apologize for that. And here we go. Now, I'm going to leave you guys, because I'm going to do a couple of these. I'm going to leave you with this particular one. I wanted to share with you the J.P. Hanley one, and then I'm going to end out this live, because I am going over too long. Where the heck did that just go? Oh, I have it pulled up here. Hold on. I have it already pulled up. I thought I did. I apologize. Live in real time. Here we go. So this is J.P. Hanley. And this is an excellent article. I highly recommend it. And he gets into stuff. I really love J.P. Hanley's work. He wrote a book, How to End the Autism Epidemic. Another great book. If you don't have that in your library, it's chock full of science. It's chock full of references and resources. So yeah, so this is the author of the autism, How to End the Autism Epidemic. He has a Substack that you can sign into. He took time off from writing. I've missed his work. He's such a great writer. He talks about all this science in a very straightforward way and gives you just boom, here it is. So let's take a look at his boom. So basically he gets into some heavy duty science here. I'm not going to read the whole paragraph because I want to keep this. We're just about an hour and I kind of want to wrap it up, so I don't want to get into it. I encourage you to read this. But basically what he's saying 20 to 45% of adults over the age of 24 no longer have derived vaccine immunity. They know this because immunity to these measles vaccines do not last fully into your adulthood. And there is something to be said that you can't keep getting vaccinated for the same thing over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. There's a word for that. Can't think of it off the top of my head. What the word for that is. Anybody out there in the medical freedom movement who knows what word I'm looking for, you just type that into somewhere, send me a message. There's a word for that. It's totally slipped me in this moment. But anyway, our immunity to this, we are not immune to it. I'm not immune to it. My mom is, my husband is, anyone who had the measles is immune to it. We are not immune because we have no more immunity to the virus because it wanes. And that's according to them. That's not me. That's not J.B. Hanley. Take a look at this. And he cites his work. So you can go and look at his Substack. You can sign up for free. He doesn't charge you. You can just continue reading it if you don't want to sign up and just look at this article, pass it around, whatever. According to the CDC, okay? According to the CDC, 33% of Americans vaccinated with 2 doses of the MMR vaccine likely lose their immunity by age 25, with the percentage losing immunity rapidly expanding with time. This is known. They never tell you this. Like, instead, over the years, they've marketed this into some scary boogeyman that if you don't get this vaccine, you're like a disease spreader, you're bad, your child's going to die. And all this terrible stuff, and they keep pushing on Bobby Kennedy to come out and say get the vaccine. And I respect Bobby Kennedy. I do. I definitely was upset by his op-ed. I see where he's in a very particularly difficult situation. I want more radical transparency, more radical honesty. I'm going to hold his feet to the fire, okay? And I'm just the type of person when somebody's language is like a little wishy-washy on something, I start to get community immunity. That's propaganda. Community immunity is propaganda. The term community immunity is like something they sat in with these advertisers to psychologically manipulate us. Okay? Community immunity. Anyway, back to the article. Here we go. So here it is. This is an article that was written in 2007. Okay. The persistence of measles antibodies after 2 doses of measles vaccines in the post-elimination environment. Protection of future antibody levels in the kindergarten group suggested as continued slow decline in titers with an increase in the proportion of potentially susceptible, reaching 33% by 20 years after the MMR. Okay? Let's see, he's talking here. This is like more stuff from their paper. I'm just going to go right into where he's really kind of focusing on childhood vaccination levels remain high. Actually, one thing that's really important to bring up here, let's bring up this point. Let's bring up this really, really important point. So they say that to achieve this herd immunity, community immunity, whatever the heck term they're deciding to use about this, they say they need 95% vaccination rate. They've never had that until recently. Okay? Our children in this day and time are the most vaccinated generation on the planet for us, right? They're the most vaccinated of any generation. I'm not as vaccinated. My children aren't that vaccinated because I woke up. I originally, what I thought was, don't give babies these vaccines. My son was severely injured, had every one under the sun. I flipped out. He got sick. And when I had another child 10 years later, I was like, oh, hell no. I'm not doing any of those as an infant. I'm breastfeeding her. I'm not worried about it. I even joined an organization in Connecticut called the Connecticut Vaccine Information Alliance and became very active in helping to get the proper information out there to parents about vaccines and medical freedom, being able to make decisions, being able to say, well, I may want this vaccine, I may not want that vaccine, I may want every vaccine, I might not want no vaccines. This is before they even coined the term anti-vaxxers. I just didn't want to do them all. It wasn't a big deal. And I didn't. My babies were unvaccinated after my firstborn. They had none, 0. Then when they were 2, I thought tetanus was a good idea. And this is back in the day where you could get a tetanus plane. So we got them the tetanus when they were toddling around because that one made sense to me at the time. I have different opinions about that now. But I was really an advocate to have access to accurate information, access to alternatives to the disease if you decide you don't want to get the vaccine, but what are the treatments, what types of treatments of all kinds and whatnot. So I was a big advocate for medical freedom, but I was selective and I thought, oh, I could do this one, I could do that one. That's just like a little personal information about my journey on this ride. And my older child got injured from the chickenpox vaccine. So I had the chickenpox, right? And I have lifetime immunity. And I gave my daughter the chickenpox vaccine, and she has an autoimmune disease. Although I took her to a homeopath, and she's been doing good, and she's older now, and so far so good. You know, maybe when you're young, you could really kind of reverse these things or keep them in check. I don't know, but it was very upsetting, very distressing. But she was able to talk to me, so you know, not to jump all over the place, but that it's just mind-boggling how they've come up with this term like anti-vaxxer, and they give you such a hard time for wanting to make informed decisions on things, especially when you're dealing with this type of stuff. Would you want to give your child this knowing that they would be, instead of getting a common childhood illness during childhood and having lifelong immunity to it and low complications, now they're susceptible to it as an adult where the complications could be more severe? This is crazy. So 20 years after the second dose of MMR, the average age 2024, the CDC believes 20 to 45% of Americans no longer have immunity to the measles. They conclude, however, that the progressive decline in antibody levels suggests a need for continued vigilance in ensuring disease protection for the vaccinated population. Anyway, we have an entire adult population under the age of 57 never exposed to measles, losing immunity at an accelerated rate. So how do we have herd immunity? This is from their study. This is the persistence of measles after dose 2 of the measles vaccine in post elimination environment, right? Because they eradicated measles, right? They got rid of that. So it actually gets much worse. This is J.P. Hanley's words. If you read the story behind the story, nearly 100% of people in the world over the age of 60 have natural immunity to measles because they had the measles as a child. Did you hear that? Hey, Boomer, you are the one screaming the loudest about this vaccine, scaring these young moms. You should be ashamed of yourself, Boomers. You should totally be ashamed. I am talking to you, okay, Boomer. Look, Boomer, you had the measles and you're here to complain, and now you're scaring these young mothers And you don't even know what the hell you're talking about. So at the beginning of the 1960s, it was clear that a vaccine against measles would soon be available, although measles was and remains a killer disease in the developing world. In the United States, this is, of course, he's quoting something. This is the ideology. This was no longer so. Many parents and medical practitioners considered measles an inevitable stage of development. That was before all that, right? By 1960, thanks to the use of antibiotics and improvements in living conditions, measles mortality was declining steadily in the industrialized countries. Parents largely came to see measles as an unpleasant, although or less inevitable part of childhood. Many primary care physicians shared this view. And guess what? This population cohort with naturally derived measles immunity is getting older, dying, and their share of population is on a rapid decline. They are the ones, these people with natural measles immunity, keeping measles in check. This is according to a recent paper, by the way. Del Bigtree was talking about this in his last show, which there's a whole clip on that, about the same study that they're both quoting out of. This is Hanley quoting out of it. They're the ones that keep with the natural measles immunity, keeping measles in check, and as they die off, what's going to happen? Measles cases are going to skyrocket. Why? Because of accelerated loss of measles-derived immunity from all the adults who never had measles. I would be one of them. I had the stupid vaccine. Further proof that when you mess with Mother Nature, bad things happen. So imagine if my mother was told, look, you had the measles, and my mom had a bad case of them, so she might have been on the fence about this. I don't know. She did not have fun, but she made it through, and she's fine. So my mom had them twice, but if somebody, if doctor said to her, well, we could give your daughter this vaccine, but by the time she's 24, she's going to be not having immunity anymore, and we really can't keep vaccinating her with the same strain because it does not work. You cannot. It does not work. Continuous boosters do not work. Why do you think they change the flu strain all the time? Yes, with the flu strain, of course, the flu naturally migrates. It changes. It mutates. So the flu vaccine, it mutates. So, yeah. It's how do they even look and decide what strain of flu? Where they sit there together, like, what? And you just go out in the air and put your finger out. Gee, I think this is going to be the flu this year. This is going to be a virus we're going to call the flu. Let me test the wind. Anyway. The risk of death from measles is greatly exaggerated. We have great data from the 1950s and 60s before public health became a vaccine hype machine. Looking at my neighbor to the north, the state of Washington, they had 16,659 cases of measles in 1959 and 1 death. Okay? Here it is. Here he cites his work. I love his stuff. In 1959, there were 6,649 cases of measles. See, actual data from the state of Washington before the measles vaccine was available shows how much measles mortality risk is being exaggerated. Look at this. Look at that. Three people. Deaths. There's like one, I think that's like 1 or 0.300. It's interesting. He talks about the numbers more. Here we go. The lack of protection that so many adults have to so many diseases. This is a really important thing to think about. The lack of protection that so many adults have to so many diseases destroys every notion that we have herd immunity anywhere, and yet the fear-mongering persists. To put this in perspective, we are roughly 150 million adults in the United States walking around with no vaccine-provided protection for many diseases that we are supposed to have met herd immunity thresholds for. The CDC surveys adults every year, so it's easy enough to find vaccination coverage rate. Here are just a few. Hepatitis A, 9%. Hepatitis B, 24.5%, pneumococcal 20.4%, influenza 43.2%. These are what percentage people are taking of these vaccines. The adults work in schools where they don't have the same immunization requirements as children. Work in restaurants, work in stores, and are in every community, which means we are nowhere close to herd immunity, never been. In fact, I don't think most adults even realize that the CDC maintains an adult immunization schedule. I think people know that now, or are likely to know that now. With so many people unvaccinated or with waned immunity from vaccine, where are all the crippling epidemics? It's a great question. And then the article in the congressional newspaper, The Hill, titled, "If Only Half of America is Properly Vaccinated, Where Are the Epidemics?" And this was written by Gretchen DeBoo. And she goes on to talk about this, but I'm not going to get into all that. Let's just look into here. There was never a golden age in the past when vaccine acceptance and vaccine rates were as high as they are today. And this is where I'm going to leave you guys. The truth is, there are more U.S. children getting more vaccines for more infections at younger ages than ever in history. Here's a 1962. Decades of 30 to 40% unvaccinated population with no epidemics. Look at that. Look at that. Decades. So vaccines are not some miracle they try to spread themselves. That the propaganda machine. Vaccines are a product. Vaccines are a product. They should not be liability free. Vaccines must always be by choice. And I do respect that Bobby is saying it's a personal choice. God bless him. God bless you, Bobby, for that. I'm going to definitely hold his feet to the fire. Yes, I'm going to be highly critical. And if that upsets people, I really don't care. That's just my personality. Love me or hate me. I don't care. So here we go. The 90% plus coverage rates we see today were first achieved in the late 90s and are a result of the convergence of three programs. School attendance requirements, which began in the late 70s. The near complete identification of liability vaccine manufacturers, administrators by the National Vaccine Injury Compensation Program, and the VSIP. This is where this comes from. So the 90 plus coverage rates, and I want to get into that in next. I want to talk about all the money and how governments buy these vaccines and then turn around and mandate them. Don't you see how that could be a problem? I mean, this is a big problem. The government buys the vaccine and then turns around and mandates it and is involved with the pharmaceutical industry through public-private partnerships, which is by the very definition fascism. And we're getting medical fascism, where people are like, I get some people saying the worst things to me. I got a few trolls. I let them be. I like to see what people are thinking. And unfortunately, some of these people are really nasty. And the boomers, come on, man. What the heck? I got some boomers on my wall that they just like stuff heads. Okay, you're a lawyer, big dang deal. You're wrong. I don't have all day to write. I'm not going to write an article in a Facebook comment to convince you, but I find it interesting and I let them talk and whatever, take or leave it. The people reading the comments, again, I don't have time to argue with all that. He's wrong. You're wrong. And you had the measles, so you got lifetime immunity. So, did you get your 10th booster yet? No, I'm just kidding. I don't want to be rude like that. So, fact, we don't even vaccinate for most communicable diseases, so those outbreaks never make the news. Take a look at this. This is great. This is where we're coming to the end of this. Here's Oregon's data. So these are all the things that you could have, right? All the diseases that you could have. We don't even vaccinate for most communicable diseases. So those outbreaks never make the news. So these are all the communicable diseases. Rocky Mountain spotted fever. Oh, and then there's something about rubella where they say that we eradicated rubella. I have a picture of this. Take a look at this. This is from the CDC. It says 2024 marks the 20th anniversary of rubella elimination in the United States. Woo! So if rubella has been eliminated from the United States, why are you still injecting people with these freaking host of carcinogenic materials? Because they're never studied for carcinogenic or mutagenic potentiality. 13.1 of every package insert says the same thing. Not studied for carcinogenic and mutagenic. Capability in your later years. They could be cancerous. They could be mutagenic, and they don't know. It says it. 13.1 of every vaccine package insert says the same thing. So why would you risk cancer if the disease has been eradicated? They say it's eradicated. Here it is, the greatest story ever told. Oh, there's some weirdness about rubella. I got to tell you, oh my God. It's like, it's like a soap opera writing about vaccines in a way. It really is. It's like a soap opera. It's just insane. It's like this weird kind of macabre, science fiction-y kind of, mobster soap opera story. So he goes on to say, don't believe the hype. My opinion goes something like this. Big Pharma and all those who benefit from their laggies would love to see RFK removed. That's where he's thinking. I don't think they're going to remove RFK. They probably would like to see him come out and be more like me. But RFK isn't me. That's a good thing. Because I would say that's a terrible, terrible, awful thing. And I wouldn't give it to my worst enemy, let alone a child. I guess that's why I got upset, because I feel like when, there's a lot of scared parents out there and they're worried because the hype is so bad. And it disturbs me because I know how many injuries have come from the MMR jab. And it's an interesting history. And I'll only scratch the surface of even the long list of notes that I had here that I hope to get up in the Substack. I'm going to be pretty busy this week up at Hartford. A lot to talk about with Connecticut. I got to get back focused with that. But you can see these are all of the different links that I have, including an outbreak in Syracuse University of the mumps, where they talk about the whistleblower. This was like in 2012. There was also a Navy ship that was held out to sea because of the soldiers on the ship got mumps. And then I'm going to try and break into that JAMA article. I'd really like to do that. And then there's this really good article by Barbara Lowe Fisher that was reposted in Vaccine Impact News, where it goes, she's got look at just the whole history. This is a really, really good article. I recommend it for everybody who wants a copy of this article. Message me. I try to get to my message. Put a comment in the video. I'll definitely see that. I try to do the best I can to keep up with stuff and keep up with messages. Messenger is really bad for me. It's not a great place to communicate with me. I apologize about that. I'm going to figure something out. Responding right into the comments might be a good way for me to catch it. I get so hit with emails. It's hard. I got a lot of problems with my email. I'm going to be switching it out and going through something more private and secure in the future soon. But this is a really, really good article. It just goes into all of the history cited. One of the things that I really appreciate about a good article is the citations. So you can go and you could look and you could see this yourself. This is a big, long article. It's definitely worth the read. Send it to all the young moms out there. Millennials approach baby boomers as America's largest generation. Electorate. That's like wild stuff. Anyway, she's just got all these great links. And yeah, on that note, I got to transition out of here. Stay strong, stay well informed, question everything, guys. Until we meet again in Cyberland, I got to go. But don't fall for the virus is the new boogeyman. There's big, big billions of dollars in the vaccine biologics industry. And I'm glad that Bobby Kennedy is the head of HHS. It's not always perfect. I think we should hold his feet to the fire. We are not the Secretary of Health. We are private citizens, so we don't have to dance a dance. We could say it outright. The MMR is extremely concerning and has more risks than the actual illness does. But I'm not a doctor. You shouldn't take medical advice from me. You should make your own decisions with your own private medical provider and make those decisions in an informed way so everybody can have access to informed consent. Wouldn't that be a beautiful thing? Isn't that just a simple thing? That's a wonderful thing. On that note, enjoy the rest of your day till we meet again. Adios.